Well, hello everybody, and welcome into a Rink Report where it's been quite a while. I'm Katie Florio, as always, joined by Tarik El-Bashir. Tarik, it's fun to kind of shake some of the rust off. They always say, all right, players get rusty. Well, I feel like we broadcasters can get rusty too. So I'm so excited to have finally a few weeks to talk about hopefully some interesting things coming down the line here.
Katie, I've been covering this team for 2 decades, and whenever they don't make the playoffs, it's like disorienting. Like the
Yes.
first couple of weeks, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like I know I should be working on something because they're almost always in the playoffs. So the few times that they haven't made the playoffs, it's such a long, kind of boring stretch. I mean, thank goodness it's kind of fun to watch, the NHL and NBA playoffs. That kind of keeps me sane. But still, it's just you do get a little bit of rust, and then you got to ramp up really quick. And that's just for us. The folks behind the scenes, the Capitals, they've been full go for a while now with the draft coming up at the end of this week, and then pretty much right into development camp, and then free agency. I mean, this is when teams get built. This is when front offices kind of make their monies, when they earn their paycheck. So it's going to be a really exciting stretch here, I think. I mean, obviously the Capitals have two picks in the first round. It's been a while since they've had that. Are they going to make both of them? Who knows? There's trade rumors have started to fly around the league. I think we're in for an exciting few weeks here.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. That is what we are focusing on right now, the NHL draft, free agency, and then of course development camp. And to your point, two picks right now, 16 and 18 for the Capitals in the first round. Will they keep both? Will they package one in a trade? We don't know. Of course, a lot of free agency talks as well. Capitals, okay, they need that top six scorer. There's so many parts right now. So as we enter this week, in your mind, what is the most important factor?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that I'd be surprised if they make both of those first round picks. They are in a mode where they are still retooling a bit, but their window for getting into the playoffs. I mean, they only missed by what, like 1 point. I mean, they were the last team out. I mean, they're right there. And when you're drafting in those mid-teens, you're talking about players that are 3-4 years away. Something tells me they're going to make their pick probably at 16. And I think 18, they might look to package that and get a player who could help right now. This team has been on the hunt for a top six scorer, maybe two of them, and they have not been able to land one the last 2 years. Something tells me they're going to go really aggressive and try to get that done. Unfortunately for them, the free agent pool is pretty shallow. And so everyone else is going to be looking to swing one of those trades too. So it's going to be difficult, but I feel like if they're going to make that move, the time is now.
Well, if there's anyone who hasn't really had quote unquote an off season up to this point, I think it's safe to say it's Capitals assistant GM Ross Mahoney. He's going into his 29th draft. I mean, there's
Crazy.
really nobody better in this organization who understands the ins and the outs of that type of process. And he was able to catch up a few weeks ago on the Hockey Lifers podcast with Jeff Merrick.
How many drafts is this for you now? Like 30?
This will be my 29th draft I've run for the Capitals.
29th,
And then I was, worked 5 years part-time with Vancouver and a couple with Buffalo before that. But yeah, I'm, 20. I don't know how that's happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been, I've been very fortunate, But you work for a really good organization with great ownership and, 29th draft running it with the same team.
The obvious question then becomes, from your first pick, which would have been Alexander Ovechkin, correct me if I'm wrong there, to now, what the main difference is?
In the running the drafts? I think technology has really improved. When I first started, I mean, you were doing your reports in triplicate on a form that you filled out, and you'd mail the form in, the white copy and the pink copy to the office on Monday morning, and then you keep the yellow copy in a binder at home. Even when I got to Washington, I mean, I remember George McPhee hired me, and George was like, get a cell phone. So I had to go get a cell phone. The cell phones were just coming out. And then
could you imagine doing this without a cell phone now?
No, and then, and then computers, and then computer programs, and some of the stories about trying to follow these younger players a long time ago without GPS, and I'm over in Europe, and you're driving and trying to get to a rink, and Yeah, it was. I had to give myself a lot more time before I left the hotel to get to the game than I do today. But yeah, technology was probably one of the biggest things, and even I mean the combine is fantastic because we end up with all the players, 110 of them.
Yeah.
Like I said, here in the same place. Before you'd be running around and interviewing them all over the place, and I'm sure it's a lot easier for the kids, to be interviewed in a central place, and the fitness testing, is all done here.
Yeah.
Before they were, like I said, teams were going around, and Central does a fantastic job of it, setting this up for us.
Sure, I remember it used to just used to take place at a hotel by the airport in Toronto.
Yeah,
and it was fly in one day and fly out, and that was it. And now it's turned into a week-long event.
Yeah,
like you've seen this evolve.
Yeah, a lot. It's the testing that they do now, and the technology again that they use to record, the tests that they do. It's and to be able to get the feedback from it almost immediately from Central Scouting. Yeah, it's a big change. It's really evolved for the good.
There's so much information that comes in, and there's the old saying, "Oh, you can never have enough information, never." And I kind of look at that statement sideways and say to myself, is that really true that you can't have enough information? Like, is there a process that you need to go through to sort of streamline the information that comes in about players, just to take away the cloudiness around, like, there's gonna be a lot of information here from the combine, a lot of information following kids for so many years, different eyeballs, different reports. Do you find that maybe one of the biggest challenges in your position is streamlining all the info so you get a concise read?
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful. They run through the battery of tests, and it's really good, but we still have to remember that the game is being played on the ice, and so you have to be careful with that, I think. But I mean, our strength coaches are fantastic. They kind of streamline a lot of that information for me,
right,
and be able to tell me what they can try to project where the kids will be, 5 or 6 years from now. So, yeah, it's but you have to be careful with too much information, and I think you have to be able to, like I said, put it in a package that's presentable, that makes sense, that helps you make better decisions as far as coming up with your final list.
Let me ask you about what happens after the player is picked, because we focus on so much on like identification and then drafting and then NHL, and we forget about the whole development piece altogether here too. Like, your staff put together a Stanley Cup champion. And I think one of the things that we don't value enough or talk about enough is there's American Hockey League championships here too with Hershey Bears that I don't think we talk about either. So like, your staff has put together NHL champions, AHL champions as well. Do we, and I'm indicting myself here as a media member, do we in the media not talk about the development piece enough, considering how important that is?
Yeah, it is really important. I think it's development and opportunity, but you can draft a lot of good players, but if you're not developing them, you're not going to have the success that you have. And like a lot of people say, when we won the Cup, I think we had 16 drafted players play at least one game. Maybe 11 or 12 played every game. And we had our obvious Nick Backstroms and Alex Ovechkins and Kuznetsovs and the first round guys, but we also had a Christian Juice taken in the 7th round that played 23 games. And, for a player like Christian, that doesn't happen without getting really good development. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you're right. I mean, a lot of those kids came through, Alzner, Carlson, they all came through Hershey. And Hershey has had a lot of success down there. I think, since we moved there, I think we've had 7 Calder Cup finalists, 5 Calder Cup winners. So development is huge. And I think we were one of the first teams to get a person that was really responsible strictly for development. Mm-hmm. So we had Steve Richmond, who was one of my area scouts. Yeah. And we took Steve and we put Steve in that development role. His son Danny was drafted early in the 2nd round, I think by Carolina. So Steve had and he played in the minors for a long time and maybe 150 games in the NHL. So Steve did a fantastic job getting that set up, and we added to it with Brooks Orpik and working with the defensemen and Ole Kolzig and Jim Slater. And it's huge. I mean, just because you draft them, you can't assume they're just going to, morph their way into being this NHL player. Someone's got to help them along the way. And they get out and watch them practice and watch them play games and take them out for supper or lunch and work with them. And Yeah, development is huge. And you're right, it's not talked about enough.
That was Ross Mahoney and Jeff Merrick. You can catch that full conversation on the Hockey Lifers YouTube page. But Tarik, Ross is a busy man because earlier this week we had the chance to chat with him, the whole media corps, outside media, beat writers, everybody got to pick his brain before the draft. So what was your biggest takeaways of his media availability as we head into this draft?
As always, they're going to aim to take the best player available. That's the right attack, I think. But I did find it very interesting that he said that there could be some centers there available in that mid-teen range where they're picking, and that's a position of need slash interest for the Capitals. They've got some really good wingers in the pipeline. Ryan Leonard has graduated. I don't really count him as being in the pipeline. But they've got Andrew Crystal and Lyndon Lakovic, and other than Milton Gastrine, I'm not sure how many centers they have that are projected to play NHL games in the near term. So I feel like that's probably one direction they're going to go there. He also acknowledged that from a strategic standpoint, they've talked about potentially packaging 16 and 18 and moving up. I think that's going to be really tough because the front end of the draft is so strong this year. They've also talked about maybe taking one of those picks and parlaying it and moving back and acquiring another pick because they don't have a pick in every single round. So I think they're going to have options. And of course, there's going to be what we talked about a minute ago. Using one of those first round picks, packaging it potentially with a player on the roster or a prospect, and trying to go out and get what they really need, which is a fast scoring winger. I know we sound like a broken record. The entire league is looking for a fast scoring winger in their 20s, right? But you know what? The Caps in the past, when they've had a need, they've acted decisively and they've gone out and addressed it when they're able to, when it makes sense. And I feel like they're at the point where it kind of needs to happen.
And to that point, we can say, oh, the off season's boring, but it's really not, because this is the time those masterminds behind the scenes go to work. And so kind of take an NHL big picture. I just saw an incredible stat. I think, don't quote me on this, but Florida Panthers, for example, we all saw earlier this week the big trade in getting Brady Tkachuk. He's reunited with his brother Matthew in Florida. But I believe now from the year 2021 up until 2029, Florida gave up all of their first round picks that they have had for him, plus all the other players that they've gotten in the past years. They're just unloading for kind of a, yes, let's keep winning now mentality. So again, going back to sort of the draft, the picks mixed with, okay, what do we need from free agency? It feels like there's a fine line for every team. And of course, every team is different between the development and being excited about the young players that you have. We know that the Capitals really do put a lot of importance on development. And I think you've used the phrase overcook guys to an extent sometimes. They want them to be more than ready. But at the same time, if you want to keep up and you want to that win now mentality, having to give up things for what is already out there, where do the Capitals kind of fall in between those two mindsets?
I would say in between, right? I feel like the Capitals, like I said earlier, they're still retooling and building a little bit while trying to remain competitive and get back into the playoffs. When you look at the Florida Panthers, big disappointment last year. Alexander Barkov was hurt. Their captain was out, arguably their best player. Their whole season was just a big disappointment. It just did not go the way that they hoped it would. But they still have that group that made all those Stanley Cup runs, right? So they're in win like this second mode right now. And if that means giving up 3 first round picks in a second, you do it, right? Like, you just do it. I feel like their ownership group is a lot like Vegas's ownership group. Just push all the chips to the middle. Let's just keep this going for as long as we can. And you know what? We'll worry about the empty cupboards, down the road. The Caps not that long ago were in that same mode where they were constantly trading young players and draft picks. And, I remember not that long ago, like, their first pick was in the 4th round. I remember sitting there at the draft going, oh, this is so boring. I mean, it's just, when you're in that mode, you're in that mode. And the Capitals are trying to kind of walk that fine line where they're trying to improve their team and get back into the playoffs. And potentially, once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen, right? I mean, they're hoping to be good enough to get invited to the dance and see what can happen. The Florida Panthers, man, when I think about that top 6 or top 7 forward group, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how, I mean, Barkov, Bennett, Marchand, both Kachucks. I mean, it's like it's Verhage. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, someone really good is going to be on their third line, or maybe even lower in the lineup. So, I think smart teams are going to be kind of circling a little bit too there, looking for maybe another player who, like a Justin Sordiff, who no longer has a spot there because they keep bringing in all these top players. And maybe, I mean, the Caps benefited from that. It wouldn't surprise me if another team also is able to get in on that.
It's a fun time of year for a different reason. Yeah, there's no hockey action, but it just kind of shows you, like you said, where every team is at, the different mindsets, the different GMs kind of, okay, how are we going to play this? But again, the Capitals, their own team doing their own thing. And if there's anyone who loves the draft, loves free agency, this is his bread and butter. It is the Capitals. Mike Vogel, and we had the chance to catch up with him earlier. Well, we're now pleased to welcome in Mike Vogel. Vogues, good to see you again. It's been a while since we've talked some hockey, but fortunately for us, we have a lot of exciting things happening this week. Draft, free agency starts, development camp. But before we get to all of that, I want to start with big news last week, and that was head coach Spencer Carberry signing a multi-year extension with the Capitals. We see not just the success he's had in his time here, but just the respect that he has earned from everyone around him. So what do you think an extension like this means for the organization moving forward?
No, I think it's something that was high on the organization's to-do list during the offseason. And it's kind of rare here in Washington. My first thought when I heard about the news was, when's the last time the Caps extended one of their head coaches? And I think you got to go back to Bruce Boudreau, who was hired as an interim coach initially for just the remainder of that season, and then was given an extension after that. So he did actually sign a second contract. I'm pretty sure he's the last one. And before him, I don't know, it might have been Ron Wilson. You might have to go back even as far as Brian Murray, who's, still after all these years, almost 40 years after his coaching tenure ended, he's the all-time games coach leader. Now, Carberry, I think, has put himself on a track at least to perhaps threaten that. But we don't know. He signed a multi-year extension. We don't know how many years are part of that. That's typical. You don't want your fan base or your players to know how long your coach has left on his contract in the NHL. That's just one of those things that we kind of keep under wraps here. But yeah, I think to your point, it's as he heads into his 4th season, he's already one of the longest 5 or 6 tenured head coaches in the NHL. And I think he's a guy, obviously, with his age and his dynamism. He's won us over here. I think when you go around the league and you talk to other reporters and they come up to you at the end of scrums and say, boy, you guys are pretty fortunate to be working with a head coach like that. I have not worked in any other NHL organization, but I have worked with 10 or 11 different head coaches here in Washington. And he's absolutely one of the 1 or 2 best humans and communicators. So we are definitely lucky to have him. And it turns out he's a pretty good hockey coach too. And that's what he's going to be, weighted on and graded on in the years ahead.
Bogues, I think you said it best there with Carberry. This was one of many to-do things on the Capitals summer list. But while we're talking about coaches, yeah, let's talk about Ray Bennett for a second. Hired as Capitals assistant coach this year, obviously has his ties with the Islanders and the Colorado Avalanche. But what do you see in him and his skill set and experience that he can bring to this organization?
I mean, Ray Bennett's one of those guys that if you've been around the game a long time, you know who he is, you know what he looks like. You maybe never had a conversation with him before, and that's the case with me. But man, this guy's coached almost continuously in the National Hockey League since 1999, which is really impressive. You don't get to stay in this league that long unless you're good at what you do and you're a good people person. People want to have you around. So you go back to his history. He actually worked in USA Hockey for a while before coming to the NHL in 1999 with the Los Angeles Kings. And it looked like his entree into the NHL was with Andy Murray, who had a really good career in the National Hockey League and then coached collegiately after that. But Ray Bennett coached with Murray in Los Angeles and in St. Louis for a large period of time. And then after Andy Murray was out of the game, Bennett went on to Colorado, won the Stanley Cup there, worked with the power play, had a lot of success there. And it seems like Bennett was made scapegoat in Colorado when things went a little sideways and they needed someone to put the blame on. And that's when he latched on and got the job in Long Island last season. So he just had the 1 year on Long Island. They did not have a good power play in New York last year. Personnel has something to do with that too. For me, I'm excited to get Ray Bennett in here because he's a very personable guy. From everyone that you talk to who knows him, and again, you kind of know this already just because, like I said earlier, you don't get to hang around the National Hockey League as a coach at this level for a quarter of a century without being a good human and being good at what you do. So now you get him. He's worked with power plays for most of his coaching career. He's going to come in here with a fresh set of eyes and look at the personnel and look at what's in the cupboard here. And that's still fluid. We don't know who these players are going to be quite yet. Maybe middle of next month, we'll have a clearer picture of that. But I'm excited about Ray Bennett coming in here and being Mr. Fix-It and finding a better way of utilizing these players, arranging them on the ice and developing a power play system that uses their strengths to their collective maximum. So yeah, I think, when Kirk Muller did the same thing 3 years ago, came in, had ideas, and I think they just never seemed to, I think personnel wise, they had too many pieces that were the same for too much of Kirk's time here that they just couldn't, old habits die hard and guys would just do the same
default
thing.
to the same spot,
exactly.
same place.
And it just got too stale and too samey over the period of time. And look, you cannot have a guy, Alex Ovechkin, lead the National Hockey League in power play ice time and finish 90, whatever he finished in power play goals, 5. So I think you got to find a way to maximize what Ovi can do on the power play, but probably not have him out there for the entire 2 minutes any longer at this stage in his career, because you just witnessed 82 games worth of him leading the league in ice time. Now, the fact that you've got Cole Hudson for the whole season may put a different paint job on that. But again, this is a Ray Bennett. This is something that Ray Bennett and Spencer Carberry will put their heads together. And let's not forget that Spencer Carberry,
oh yeah,
is a power play guru as well. So you've got two pretty good heads to work on this problem with. And one guy's got 3 years worth of experience in dealing with it. So I'm optimistic that this is finally going to get solved.
Well, we had a great conversation this morning, Monday morning, with Caps assistant GM Ross Mahoney, as we now look ahead to the NHL draft this week. And then, of course, the big question, like you said, a big part of that Capitals to-do list, free agency and what moves they're going to make in that. So as we get into this part of the week where we maybe start seeing some of that movement, plus these two at this moment, the 2 first-round picks that the Capitals have, how do you see all of that playing out?
Yeah, we've seen Chris Patrick talk last summer and this summer about the need to add a dynamic scorer to the team's top 6, 1 and maybe even 2. I think there's need in the Caps' top 6, maybe 1 on each side, ideally. But how do you do that? You're not going to draft at 16 or 18 a player who can fit into those slots this season. You may be able to take those pieces, 1 or both of those pieces, and use them to bring in 1 or maybe 2. They do have some draft capital in the years ahead too that they can use for that, and they've got some prospects. The Caps have, I think, the 11th best prospect group in the league according to The Athletic.
Yep.
So they are in a decent position. They've over the last few years, I think, done a really good job of making themselves younger, but they still need some real high-end offensive talent. They've got a goaltender who you can envision being their goaltender for a few years. They've got a good group of defensemen. Might need to add a right-hander back there just to balance things out. But I think aside from maybe adding a right-handed defenseman and a couple of forwards up front, a couple of name brand forwards with some offensive wherewithal, those would be the boxes that they're trying to check between now and say middle of next month. Although I think that given the landscape of the NHL now, with so much money to be spent and so little to spend it on in the way of quality in terms of the free agent market, I think you could see for the last 15, 20 years, team building happens in the NHL between June 15th and July 15th. I think now we may see that stretch out a little beyond July 15th. You may see some guys lingering in the free agent market until the market figures out what to pay them, because there's just too much money and not enough talent right now. There's going to be a real danger of overpaying in the free agent market.
The GMs are really going to regret.
They're really
going to regret their signings.
This time last year, it looked like a real fun free agent market, but teams realize that the best way to spend that extra cash is to sign the players you already have in house.
Yeah.
And so if that's going to be a long-term thing in the league, and it looks like, given the way the cap's going to keep rolling upward here, it does look like that. That's going to put a higher premium on those draft picks, and that's going to put a lot more burden on your scouting department to make good on those picks too. Cost-controlled talent is something that you need if you're not Florida or Las Vegas.
You mentioned Connor McMichael earlier, restricted free agent with arbitration rights.
Yeah.
How do you see things working out there? And if I'm not mistaken, Ryan Leonard is eligible for an extension this summer, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And this is the last opportunity for them to get him for 8 years too.
Yeah, if there's a number that makes sense, and if Leno is willing to give up that extra year, that's definitely something that you would think, given what we saw from him last year, that the team would be interested.
I'm sold.
in latching on. Yeah, me too. Absolutely, they'd be interested in latching onto that extra year for sure. What was the front part of that?
Connor McMichael.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting, if it does get to arbitration. I mean, I think ideally, you always want to avoid arbitration, because that makes you pay your guy on the basis of what your dumbest competitor pays a similar player. That's just how arbitration works. And you've got these independent arbitrators who may or may not know anything about hockey, making these decisions. So I think we've seen some of these arbitration cases, awards we've seen in years past that teams would walk away from or immediately trade the guy. Yep. I think GMs have gone to school on that. You don't see that happen too much anymore. I think teams typically manage to get things figured out before it gets to that point. I can't remember the last time the Caps had a contentious arbitration case with one of their young players like Connor McMichael. So
I'm sure Don Fishman has already written the brief.
Yeah. He probably has, for sure. But he's latched onto the comparables at least, for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes itself out too, because he had a great year 2 years ago and was just a little less formidable last season. So you always wonder how that plays out.
I was digging into the comparables the other day, and it's not easy for him with the big drop off in goals, particularly. Ryan McLeod kind of jumped out to me a little bit, but I really
he's a guy who plays two positions, plays on both special teams, so he's an interesting case.
Mm-hmm.
So you could see he's definitely one of those guys that you could see there being a little bit of a difference of opinion. Sure. What am I worth? What does the team think I'm worth? So it could be a little difficult to settle on a number for a guy like him that has, so much going for him and that you can't necessarily quantify. The utility, being able to play a couple of different
Yep.
positions and being able to play on both special teams. Middle six guy, a guy that you drafted and developed, who's one of, helped you win a Calder Cup. He's got a lot of positives, and he's at that age right now too, where you can expect him to kind of break out and become the player he's going to be during his prime years.
Oh, the last one for you. And you mentioned him. He's a prime example. Calder Cup, shifting gears a little bit to the Hershey, Washington connection. We know the strong just affiliation that these two teams have was announced earlier this week that yet another preseason game will be played at Giant Center in Hershey. So once again, it was a great outcome last year. I know you were there. We were all there. And just what does that say about how unique this affiliation is and just the strong ties and relationships between the two teams?
Well, I think, Katie, for me, the thing that really points it out clearly is last year you had 6 preseason games total. You played one of them in Hershey, and you did that for the first time in 19 years, playing a preseason game in your AHL affiliate city. It must have gone well because the number of preseason games is shrinking from 6 last year to just 4 this year, and that's to accommodate an 84-game regular season schedule. And yet, with only 2 home games, they're going to play one of them in Hershey. So that tells you all you need to know about how well that went last year. And I think, playing the game against Philadelphia also makes a lot of sense too, because let's face it, that area, that sort of lower right, southeastern quadrant of Pennsylvania there, if you will, is probably pretty equally split between Washington and Philadelphia fans. So it's a good opportunity for fans of both teams to descend upon the Giant Center and get a nice sneak preview of what's in the cupboard for the Philadelphia Flyers as well as the Washington Capitals.
Well, it was a lot of fun last year. Glad they're doing it again. And we have a lot of fun, hopefully a lot of interesting info, things coming up throughout the next few weeks. So Vogues, thanks so much for joining us as always. Always wonderful insight from you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, folks.
We'll appreciate Vogues' time. He is always such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to anything team history. He's literally the Capitals historian, but I know he loves the draft, loves everything that it involves. And Tarik, as we head into this year, like we said, at this moment, they have 16 and 18 in the first round. I know you've been looking at a lot of the big boards and things like that, all the kind of fake drafts and things that circulate what's going to happen. So what are some names maybe that have been thrown out there who you think could be on the Capitals' radar?
Like I said earlier, Katie, I feel like center is really where the Capitals need to focus. Obviously, if a player of another position who might have gone earlier slips, I think you always go with best player available. But if there needs to be a tiebreaker, center is an area that needs to be addressed. And Tynan Lawrence from BU is a name that we've heard a lot. He's probably going to be gone by the time the Caps are up at 16. But if he's there, wow, that's a dynamic player. Alexander Command is a player that you're going to hear from Sweden. Oliver Savanto, a Finnish player. These are all centers I'm talking about. Ilya Morozov, he played at Miami, Ohio. He's I think 18 years old, super young, but good frame, good size, a lot of skill. So there are a lot of really good centers that are going to be available there between, I would say 13 and about 20. And unless someone falls, something tells me you're going to hear one of those names. Or if I didn't name that one of those players, it's going to be a center somewhere there. And then there's some really good defensemen that are going to be available too. So, a center and a defenseman with some size. If the Caps keep 16 and 18, which I doubt, but if they use both those picks, I think center and defense would be a safe bet.
Well, it's always fun speculating, trying to figure out what's going to happen, but we look forward to Friday night. But now let's take a quick look back at last year's draft. The Capitals taken number 27 overall, Lyndon Lakovic. And Tarik, we had the pleasure of chatting with him earlier this week. Well, Lyndon, thanks so much for taking some time out of your summer and joining the show today. I want to start first with how you're feeling, because, like you just told me off camera, obviously there was a little bit of a setback with the injury back in the fall, but how are you feeling? How's everything healing wise going, and just kind of the steps that you've taken since then?
Yeah, thanks for having me first off, and it's been great. The first little bit, like I said, it was a little slow, but for a little while now, I've been back in the groove, and I've been feeling great about myself. I didn't look at as a step back necessarily. I kind of looked at it as I have two full summers. I got 8 months to prepare myself for the following season, and I've been going for a little bit now, and everything feels great.
Lyndon, when did you get back on the ice, and like percentage wise, where do you feel like you are physically?
Yeah, I'd probably say so. I had surgery New Year's Eve, so I got back on the ice, kind of just skating around, probably 6 weeks ish post surgery.
Mhm.
And percentage wise, I feel better than ever right now. I'm not just saying that. I've been working real hard to get back, where I left off, and improved a lot in other areas in the meanwhile, and obviously improved the shoulders. So, I feel better than ever right now.
Obviously, you never want injury, anything like that to happen, but you seem to have a really good mindset. And to your point of saying, I don't even think of it as kind of a setback. There's so many guys when they get into the NHL, maybe really do kind of experience those injuries for the first time. But for you to be going through this now, how do you think that can maybe help you in the future when it comes down the line? Like, okay, hey, I've done this before. I know what it's like now, and not kind of panic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a high level sport at the highest level, and everyone's gonna have to deal with it. And me dealing with it at 19 years old, I think it's good for some adversity and perseverance, and hopefully, knock on wood, never happens again. The injuries are the worst, but it helps you, prepare for anything that could happen, I think.
Are you going to be ready for development camp, or are you aiming for rookie camp and training camp in the fall?
That's a conversation I have to have with the trainers in Washington.
Mhm.
I'm headed down there for development camp. I don't really know what the full plan is yet, but for main camp in the fall and rookie camp and onward out, I'll be fully healthy for then. So I think at the end of the day, that's why I got the surgery, and that was the main goal for me to be ready for my first year of pro hockey, and all's going to plan so far.
Well, you can get some crab cakes when you're in Annapolis if they don't let you go on the ice and take contact.
Exactly. Oh, I heard those are pretty dialed there. So.
Oh, they're the best.
Talking to the Annapolis man himself, but whether you are or are not on the ice in the coming weeks, this is a big week for guys. You were in the position last year going in the first round to the Capitals. Now we'll see that again this year. And so just take us through that draft day for yourself and everything you kind of experienced. I'm sure it was very surreal and maybe didn't hit you until a few days later, but take us through where your mind was at a year ago when it was your name that you heard called.
Yeah, it was a pretty hectic and chaotic day, and draft day, anything could happen. I had friends telling me anything could happen. I didn't really believe it until it happened, but I kind of sunk in. I'd say probably the next morning when you hear your name called, and you're on a high, and next thing you know, the next morning you're all packed up and you're on a flight to Washington D.C. and it was pretty surreal. Hearing your name called, it's a once in a lifetime thing, and that whole year it was a lot of stress, but it paid off, and just getting down there and meeting everyone was a treat, and it's something that myself and whoever is getting picked this year, they'll never forget.
I'm sure you've got a bunch of buddies who are going to hear their names called here in a couple of weeks in Buffalo. What advice do you give to that next crop, those guys who are going to get drafted here?
Yeah, I think don't stress about it. I mean, obviously it's an important day for everyone, and everyone has their own goals and they want to go as high as possible. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the number. I think that's been proven before. It just matters the situation and what team's picking you and if it's the right position for you. And I think, that's the best advice that I got and that I've learned over the past year and through that draft. And that's what I've been telling my buddies so far. And so hopefully they listen to me.
I know you said it's obviously a whirlwind hearing your name and then getting right on that plane to DC. And so when you do come back to DC in just about a week or so for development camp this year, again, no matter kind of how involved you are, how much does it change for you in a sense of, I'm sure there was nerves learning your way around and yeah, there's probably still a lot to learn, but now a full year in, how do you maybe plan to also be that guy that does welcome those new draft picks, the guys that are just kind of getting off the ground here and making them feel comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that just goes with my personality. I think, I'm an outgoing person and, the first year it's obviously intimidating. You hang out with the NHL guys in the summer and you work out with them and train with them. And then you hear your name called and you're actually, with an NHL team. And it's a little nerve wracking at first. But I think, a couple days in, I got settled in pretty well. And, coming here in roughly 10 days or so, just making those young guys feel comfortable or the new guys, I should say. It is nerve wracking, but it's exciting. And I think, you just have to learn to enjoy it and, soak everything in. And I feel like that's what I did. And I got more comfortable as the week got on and being around guys that it wasn't their first development camp that I knew or didn't know and got to meet. It's honestly just a great week to get to know people and feeling more comfortable around an NHL organization.
Linda, I know you're a positive person. Has there been a silver lining at all to this time off? Have you been able to work on different things or explore different areas of your life or just kind of maybe become more of a complete person because you're not just, at the rink 8-9 hours a day?
Yeah, I think definitely at the first little bit, when you can't work out or you can't skate or do anything, it's definitely difficult because that's all you've known.
Yeah.
So trying to find different things to do was a little difficult and challenging. But I'd say at the start, I enjoyed hiking lots, and just spending time with the family. Honestly,
Yeah.
like the last 4 years, I've been away from home, and I normally just get roughly 3 months with them every year. So getting 8 months with them this year it's definitely different, but I feel like I've been able to enjoy that quite a bit. So I'd say that's the silver lining.
Who with your teammates, future teammates, just anyone within the Capitals organization that you've gotten to know over the year, who would you say you're maybe really starting to build those relationships with, talk to, outside of the season, talk to about more than just hockey, kind of things like that?
Yeah, I'd say Andrew Cristall and Ilya Protas. I think we've been connecting a little bit, and obviously Ilya's in Belarus right now, so time frame doesn't really check out much. So it's hard to keep in contact with him. But when we can, we talk. And Andrew, he's been up in Kelowna a little bit just because it's like a 3-hour drive. So I've hung out and skated with him a little bit, and that's been good to catch up. Talk to him about his season and everything going forward. So it's been good, trying to build those relationships with guys in the organization and, your future teammates. So it's exciting.
Ilya told me in Hershey, sorry, Tarik, but he told me in Hershey last month during AHL playoffs that he was teaching Crystal Russian. You haven't gotten to that yet, have you?
No, I have not gotten to that yet. I don't know if I'm looking forward to learning that, but I guess that's maybe something I'll have to learn with all the Russian guys coming in.
Have you gotten on the links with Andrew? And if so, which one of you is the better golfer?
I have not golfed with Andrew. From what I hear, he's a pretty good player. Yep. I don't know. I broke 80 for the first time a couple weeks ago, so I don't want to
Congratulations.
self-proclaim and say I'm the better golfer, but I think it'd be a good match.
That was a legit like 79, 78 or 79, right? Like
It
no
was
ball
77, legit.
Oh, all right, all right.
Yeah,
You got a little
yeah.
game. I like to hear that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, Lyndon, as we get into this season, get through the rest of the off season, what are maybe some of your broader goals, kind of main focuses? Like I said, a year under the belt now within the organization, and just kind of where you want to go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, I'm trying to make that opening night roster and stick there. I think that's everyone's goal, and the first year under my belt, you kind of not expected to make that team, right? And seeing the transition with a lot of the younger guys coming to the NHL, I think my goal is to try and prove that I deserve a roster spot. And I know I haven't played a game in a while, but I think I just have I've been working real hard and have something to prove when I go down to camp, even if I do happen to get on the ice in a few weeks here. But yeah, I think that's my goal.
What's the one thing you feel like you need to show when you get to training camp to prove to Carbs and company that Lyndon's ready to play? I'm ready for a spot in the NHL at 19.
Yeah, I think it's just that consistent compete. That's something I've been working on this summer is my motor.
Okay.
Being able to go all the time at 100%. And I think I have the skill set to play at the next level, and I know that's ready. Just adding all those tools, and with the downtime, I've been able to watch a lot of the games, and I watched majority of the Capitals games this year and a little bit of Hershey, and obviously the playoffs. So just learning, what players, their tendencies and stuff, and kind of the structure, Carbs and the guys like to play. And I feel like, that's what I've learned, and I feel like I just have to show that when I go to camp.
Curious, you mentioned motor and compete there. How do you work on that in the off season?
Yeah, I think well, one's kind of just a mindset, and then
Sure.
the other is just just going harder in your workouts, or more intent to the exercise, I should say, or just building that base, and then going from there. I think during your skates, you're not kind of just messing around, or you're competing, and we have a good group out here in Kelowna, and the compete level is high consistently. It's a lot of hungry guys, so I think that's where it starts.
Well, Lyndon, this has been great. Really appreciate your time today, and we definitely look forward to seeing you in just a few weeks, and wishing you all the best this season.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Tarik. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Lyndon.
it, and see you soon.
Well, Tarik, that was great stuff from Lyndon. I can't even believe he's 19 years old. I feel like he's already so poised and media trained, but great answers. Always a pleasure when we can talk to him. And I think the biggest takeaway from that call was it's really encouraging to hear that he feels really good after that injury. I know we said he's at least coming to the DC area for development camp. Not quite sure yet if he'll be on the ice or not, but definitely has to be a positive for management to hear that the progression of his healing from that upper body injury back in the fall is going well.
Yeah, and he's also been able to work on other parts of his physique, right? As a young player, when you have an injury that keeps you off the ice, I think he acknowledged there it was a shoulder injury. We'd only heard it was upper body. That allows you to lift hard on your legs and do other things. And as Ross Mahoney told us earlier, he's up to like 205 pounds or so. Because that was the biggest thing that stood out to me last year was, man, he's very sinewy. He looks like he's got to put on some man strength. So, getting some of that bulk is going to really help him, I think. Look, he was so impressive last offseason and training camp. I mean, I'm not sure, how close he got to sticking around, but he opened a lot of eyes. And he said he's really gone to work on his game in terms of motor and compete, and that was something that some of the scouting reports said, oh, you know what, we want to see a little more in that area. The fact that he's gone to work on that and put on some more size and is trending towards being healthy. Look, I think he's going to be a very good player in this organization for a long time, but I don't think they're going to rush him either. But Looking forward to seeing a healthy Lyndon Lakovic back on the ice and see what he can do in training camp.
Well, a lot to look forward to. Look forward to seeing him. And of course, a big week coming up with development camp. It'll be here in Arlington. It's the first look at some of the new prospects, the new draft picks, getting to put on the Capitol sweater for the first time. So, no, it's an exciting week for them. They have a lot to prove right out the get-go. And of course, you and I will be there covering the entire week as well. So, Tarik, thanks so much. This was fun to do again. Great to talk some hockey. This one, we got the rust out, things like that. But we'll be right back with you next week to recap the draft and take another look at development camp. So thanks for tuning in today.